Alright, so guys, I'm going to talk about philosophical discussions I had with my mom on God, but what I really want you guys to do is get some food, the Wi-Fi is up there, get some drinks, do some stuff. I'm going to keep going because I want to stay according to time, but don't hesitate, get up and get stuff, relax, you don't have to be silent, just relax and enjoy. And Elizabeth bought these beautiful popsicles that are frozen. So you can, and she brought scissors, it looks like too, so everything's there. Get some, please, don't be formal. I'm gonna move on because I just want to stay on time. Okay.
Somebody said popsicle.
72 popsicles, you guys.
There's 72. You guys can eat 2 or 3 apiece. Alright, so there's my request. Just relax, enjoy, go for a walk. Don't sit through everything. Alright, so what I'm going to talk about...
Hey, can you wait 1 moment?
Oh, sure, yeah. Alright, so what I'm going to talk about is God. And the reason I've chosen this topic is because my grandmother and I would have these philosophical discussions. And these philosophical discussions would span decades of time. So what I'm going to go over right now may not be legit Hinduism. It's just what we talked about. It's just a discussion between a grandchild and a grandson, or a grandson and a grandmother. Okay, so when I was growing up in the West, from my perspective, it seemed that Hinduism was a very polytheistic religion. You have all these gods, the gods are sitting on lions, you've got multiple hands over here. What does all of this stuff sort of mean? And so I would approach my grandmother and ask her that sort of question. And one of the things that we sort of realize is that there are multiple interpretations to this thing that we call Hinduism. And that one of the unifying ideas, regardless of whether you believe there are multiple gods or not, is that at the end of the day, everything is a manifestation of a single source of energy. And that this single source of energy, which doesn't have arms, doesn't specifically have personality or attributes, it's just this divine and spiritual flow of energy. This is reality. This is what some people may call that one culminative consciousness. It is what people would say is the truth, and what some people may call God. And so this was sort of the underlying backbone of what my grandmother considered to be Hinduism. And again, I don't particularly find myself belonging to one religion. I feel like I'm part of many different stuff. The other idea here is that because everything is composed from that energy, everything is composed of divinity. So whether it's the person sitting next to you, or the plants and the tree or the earth itself, those all have reflections of God glittering and scintillating within there. And what I think the idea behind this, and this is probably the reason why some people say, there are millions and millions and millions of God in Hinduism. Really what they're saying is that stop for a second, look around you, and this is all a reflection of that singular source of energy. And when you do that, what it's supposed to do is awaken this genuine feeling of universal love from within. And this is really sort of the idea that everything over here is a reflection of that energy, so you should feel love for everything. And a lot of the end goals of many of these interpretations of Hinduism is that you want to emanate and feel universal love for everything around you. In that same sense, when you look at everything that's happening in the world, it is a dance of energy, from kinetic to potential, from potential to kinetic. And life and death, from my grandmother's discussions, she saw them as being the exact same thing, both processes of energy itself. And so she would tell me that the reason why we feel attachment to life and the reason why we lament death is because of this concept known as Maya. And Maya represents illusions, and not illusions in the sense of falsehood or something bad, but in the sense that everything we see is an interpretation of reality. And even neuroscience agrees with this, right? Everything I'm seeing right now is getting shattered across layers of neural nets that eventually are being processed, interpreted, and patched up together. So nothing we really experience is reality, it's an interpretation. And so she says that if you can go beyond the Maya, you'll begin to see that we're all part of the same thing, that one energy. And so you should not lament when death happens. This is one of her core beliefs that she has. To her, when I asked her the question, and I'll show you a video clip, God had no form. God was neither male nor female when her asked these questions, but rather just a divine flow of energy. And what was really surprising to me is that she would say that God is an abstract concept, right? Like you would think that this is not an abstract concept, right? It's a very physical thing that you're looking at, but to her, God was an abstract concept. And so I asked her, how do you visualize this God? How do you understand this God? How do you deeply connect to this sort of God? And what she said is that there are many different pathways of achieving that. One is through puja, which is sort of like the traditional, you could say, Hindu worship with the fire, where you sort of take these gods, you may bathe it, you may put a little tika on it, you may offer it some food. Other ways are meditation or faith, or even the intellect can bring you to that place where you can be resonating with this one source. So, she initially started her life journey through the traditional path of doing puja. And these are all different symbolic representations. And I asked her, well, what's the utility of this? And she explains, as you'll see in the video clip, that the reason is that puja allows you to focus the mind. By bathing, by offering food, you're essentially focusing your mind on a concept, on that concept of God, and that becomes a channel for you to try to resonate and synchronize with it. As she aged, her body wouldn't allow her to sit for an hour in front of these gods, and so she would lie down and visualize that process of doing puja, and then eventually she said she no longer even needed puja. For her to synchronize and flow within that divine river, all that she had to do was say Om, Om, Om. And so it was a really interesting sort of life journey. This is really across about 30 years of interviewing her that I sort of gained this knowledge. So I'll show you a few quick video clips of the wisdom that I gained from her, which I think are really pretty cool.
भगवान कुछ नहीं होते खाली भगवान
God is
होते।
nothing. He is just God.
भगवान जैसे आदमी है औरत है क्या है
Is God a woman or man? She says, no, just air.
भगवान के ऊपर गुस्सा नहीं है वो आपके कान नहीं लिए
Aren't you angry at God that He made you deaf?
गुस्सा भगवान कहाँ है?
Where is God for me to be
इसके
angry?
ऊपर गुस्सा
Who should I be angry
हाँ।
at?
तो नहीं जी थोड़ा भगवान क्या है वो थोड़ा हमको और बताइए
तो नहीं भगवान वही है जैसे दूध में
I'm asking her, define God.
इसे पढ़ के सुनाए तो थे
हाँ
और उसको दही जमाओ
हाँ
तब उसको
My mother will translate
हाँ।
this.
तब मक्खन निकले तो वही भगवान है
वाह।
सब दुनिया में हर जगह भगवान
हाँ
कहाँ नहीं है
हाँ
तो बस वही भगवान है
God is everywhere. Where is He not? Ma, can you just translate? The Makhan part, can you just give interpretation?
Oh, Makhan part. Okay. What she's trying to say that just like when we just look at the milk and we are coming from different planet, we don't know what milk does. So it will be difficult to imagine that this milk can become a yogurt and this milk can become a butter. This milk can take different shapes or become ice cream, something like that. So, but when there is a process goes on, then that different things come from that milk.
And that's the abstraction, that you look at milk and you don't know within it is this substance that can come out. And that's what she's saying God is, that God is this sort of like emergent property that comes from things that are obvious, but then the manifestation is not that obvious.
देवी देवता सब में उनका शक्ति है
Everyone has His energy.
वो कहीं नहीं
He is nowhere,
और हर जगह
and He is everywhere.
जैसे तिल्ली दिया चलाई
हाँ
जेब में रखोगे तो आग नहीं ना लगेगा
हाँ
जब उसको ऐसे
Same basic idea. If you take a matchstick and you put it in your pocket, you won't get burned.
एक सलाई पूरा
But
दुनिया को
one
जला
matchstick
सकता
can
है।
burn the whole world too.
और नहीं रगड़ोगे तो कुछ नहीं
And
कर
if you don't strike it, then nothing happens.
वही भगवान
That's what God is.
और इसके आगे कोई ऋषि मुनि
Beyond this, no one knows what God is.
भगवान क्या है, भगवान कैसे।
तो क्या भगवान के पास कोई स्वभाव है तब?
So, my mom said I didn't ask it properly, but what I was trying to ask is, does God have any
सिर्फ शक्ति है।
characteristics? And she's saying it's only energy.
देखो, साईं बाबा और ओम में कोई फर्क नहीं है।
She's saying that this representation of God and Om, there's no difference between it.
और ओम में कोई फर्क नहीं।
And there's Goddess and Om, there's no difference.
हाँ,
तुम्हारे में,
He's
हमारे
in
में,
you, He's in me,
उसी में,
He's in your aunt,
सब में।
He's in everybody.
तो बुढ़ाई में तो और क्रोध नहीं करना
You should
चाहिए।
not get angry in old age.
आजकल की बुढ़िया बहुत क्रोध करती हैं।
Today's old women get angry a lot.
तो पूजा का माने तब क्या होता है? भगवान के पास कोई स्वभाव
And I
नहीं
asked
होता,
her,
तो
like,
पूजा
what's the
क्या-
meaning of this
क्या चीज़
puja?
होता है? पूजा क्या चीज होता है? भगवान के पास कोई स्वभाव नहीं होता है, तो पूजा में क्या फायदा है? क्या करता है?
पूजा इसलिए होता है कि देखो हमारे बच्चे देखे
हाँ,
कि
To
मेरी
show
माँ
my
पूजा
kids
करती
that my mother does puja.
करना चाहिए।
And so I should do it too.
इसी तरह से बच्चों के दिखाने
It's
के
to
लिए
show
हम
children.
मानसिक पूजा
हाँ,
पहले करते थे, शंकर जी को
हाँ।
नहलाते थे,
She used to
नाना
bathe
तुम्हारे
Shankar ji.
करते,
हाँ,
4 बजे सवेरे उठ के।
हाँ,
My grandfather used to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning.
सावन में लाल चंदन घिस के लगाते,
अच्छा।
ओम करते,
तो अब आपके पास कोई फेवरेट भगवान है?
Do you have a favorite God?
कुछ नहीं।
हाँ। अब तो जो आप पूजा करती हैं अपने मन में, मानसिक पूजा कैसे करती हैं? क्या करते हैं?
How do you do this
कुछ
puja
नहीं
in your
करते
mind?
हैं।
हाँ,
जब मन होता है तो नहला देते हैं,
अच्छा। अब
पोछ देते हैं।
अपने मन में आप चित्र देखती हैं?
She looks at the image in her mind and washes them.
दुख क्रोध होता है तो ओम।
And when I get angry, I just say Om, Om.
हाँ,
कोई का नहीं सुनते,
हाँ।
थोड़ी देर में फिर
Then a little while she's fine. This will be the second. All right. So again, guys, just walk around and stuff. The next part is 15 minutes, and then we'll move on to the social part.
Way too interesting to wander anywhere.
Oh, good. Thank you. But yeah, just don't stress out, guys. Just walk around, get something to drink.
Not gonna miss any more.
And they're gulab jamuns my mom has done.
Love channel?
Yeah, taste it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, everything's chill. Just, yeah, definitely get. Okay, the final thing I want to talk about is my grandmother's journey through aging. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I feel like I've absorbed really deep and meaningful lessons from it. And one of the first pieces was that when I did devotional care, and really I didn't do much, I just sat next to her, but in that devotional presence, I felt like I went through a rite of passage. And for me, it gave me a spiritual metamorphosis. And so for that reason, I feel that old age is in a way like my grandmother's final gift to me, because it made me really think about myself, about my own journey through aging. Like, how do I prepare for it? How do I prepare for it mentally? How do I prepare for it physically or financially or spiritually? I had to ask questions of myself. How do I connect to God or spirituality? I don't visualize God as this or see this personified version of God. So how do I connect? And from my observation of my grandmother and a few other people who've been on the final stage of aging, I've seen how important a connection to this idea of God has been for them. So how do I do that without actually believing in some ways of these idols, you could say? How do I enter into a meditative state where I depend on minimal external stimulation, but still am content and immersed in a whole universe of beauty? Because I feel like these things are essential as one ages. So for my grandmother, and this is just through observation, more than 10 years ago, her body began to transition, and it stopped working in the way that she used to. She began to feel perpetually weak and dizzy. And around that time, she began to lose her autonomy, and she lost control over her finances and over pretty much all of her decision making. And so she lost control over her life itself. And what does that actually mean? when in your entire life you've been a strong, independent woman, and now all of a sudden you can't make any decision that concerns your life? How do you make peace with that? And around that time, she probably fell into depression, and she probably needed a lot of empathy, some of which she did not get. And so this was a lesson to me that we as a society really need to give greater understanding and empathy for the elderly. And the rates of depression are quite high, very understandably, in the elderly. Around that time, she then very reasonably requested to visit many, many doctors because she just wanted to feel good again. She just wanted to feel normal so that she could do all the things that she was doing. And in that journey, she fell into a monstrous trap, you could say, that ruined and wrecked her. Because sometime before 2013, she was given very heavy psychoactive drugs and anti-anxiety medication and sedatives and sleep medication. And the psychoactive drugs caused her to get these really intense tics on one side of her body, which then they assigned her, gave her muscle relaxants. So by the time my mother, my sister, and I visited her in 2013, we were told that she was about to die. And when I saw her, it was horrifying. It was legit frightening, and it was probably the worst state that I've ever seen her in. And when I saw her, her reality was fractured. She didn't know what was real and what was imaginary. She couldn't form coherent sentences. She couldn't understand what we were trying to say to her. She couldn't communicate what she was feeling. Sometimes in like a minute, her face would change and contort different emotions in just 1 minute. And she developed these really intensive tics on one side of her body. And she couldn't even read the clock or recreate it. And really one of the lessons that I got from this, deeply valuable lessons, is that medication can be a savior. But medication can also be a torturer. It can devastate a person. And gerontology is still in its infancy. You ask people, no one really knows if you've got multiple medications, especially multiple medications assigned by multiple doctors, how these medications interact with one another. No one knows that as you get older, your homeostatic mechanisms and your resilience begin to weaken, so your individual differences multiply. And so no one knows what these dosages are doing to the elderly. No one knows then, how do you adjust this? I mean, everything is sort of like magical in a way. And so it's a very sort of like dangerous place to be, and it can really negatively influence someone, especially if the doctors don't have time. You know, this was a time when we were in constant communication with my brother, who had to balance his like medical school along with giving us life and death information on pills and what to do with medication. So in 2013, my mother did something which was very, very difficult. We went to India, and then my mother, against the will of everyone around there, said that we need to get her admitted into the hospital. And it was the same hospital that my grandfather had passed away, and she remembered this, even as her reality was kind of fractured. And they had misdiagnosed her. So to their credit, they stripped away all those psychoactive drugs, and she really began to improve. But they misdiagnosed her as having Parkinson's. And that Parkinson's was because of these tics that she was getting from the psychoactive drugs. And so they put her on uppers, they put her on downers, they put her on a whole bunch of other medication, which again, we slowly stripped away through a collaborative effort of all of us and wisdom coming from my brother. After that, she began to improve. Those videos that you saw where I was interviewing her were from 2015, 2018, and 2019. So you can see that she regained her hold on reality, but she was also over-medicated. She was given sleep medication during the day so that she'd be easier to deal with. And so it was almost like she was in a comatose state for most of her last several years of life. Around that time, she couldn't hear, and so she couldn't socialize, even though she was a very social person. She couldn't enjoy TV. And she spent day after day, year after year in a bed. And she was in a mixed state, a mixed state that sort of jumped from the polar diametric opposites of the human experience, going from deep discontentment where she said that she was defeated to the point where she said, you know what, I am happy. And she would say this in the same visit that I was there when I was interviewing her. And this sort of mixed state was the proof that she was in this philosophical and spiritual battle. What do you do when you cannot control or use your body, when you feel dizzy and sick perpetually, when you cannot hear or see well, when you are completely isolated, when you spend every day in bed, and nearly all sensory stimulation and connection to the outside world is God, what do you do then? And these are deep spiritual questions to ask of oneself. And so these are things that I absorbed from her. And so in a way, she went into exile. She went into darkness, into solitude. She burned all of her expectations and desires and became desireless and detached. And how do you know what to feel about this? You read some of the scripture and they say that in the final stage of aging, you're supposed to go into Van, into the metaphorical forest. You're supposed to detach from everything. So maybe she was doing what was written for her to do, and these were ideas that she believed in. But at the same time, it's sad to see someone who's so vibrant in society now completely cut off. She no longer needed to hear the bhajans. I'd come and say, even though you're deaf, more or less, I can put on these headphones and put it on max. And she said, you know what? I don't need them anymore. And I don't need to watch Ramayana, these sacred stories that meant so much to her. She said she could almost replay it in her mind if she wanted to. She no longer needed to socialize or interact with people. I asked her once, aren't you lonely? And her answer is profound if you sort of think about it. She said, why feel lonely when you have God? And if you juxtapose that next to what she thinks God is, this abstraction, this flow of energy, I asked her, do you have conversations with God? And she's like, no, how do you have conversations with the flow of energy? So what does it mean that your loneliness is gone from a flow of energy? Right? There's something profound and deep. There are lessons embedded in there. And so these were deeply valuable things that I gained from her. And so when I asked her, she said that she was content and at peace. And again, it felt sad to me, it felt profound. I felt a lot of emotions, and they were very hard to sort of pull apart and understand. Sometimes when I visited India, especially the last time I visited her in February, people would come by and they would look at her and they would say, man, she's so miserable. Her life has no meaning. She should just die. And people would just say that, and because she can't hear, they would say it right in front of her. And I could understand where they were coming from, because they were like, wow, that's a lot of suffering that she's facing, and she should just be released from the burden of life. But for as long as she was there, from my point of view, I thought her life had meaning, because of her, she brought all of us together. She wove this storyline. My mom, my brother, my sister, myself, we all went to India because of her. And she gave us wisdom to think about what is aging and what is life and what is this concept of God. And in a way, when I looked at her, her every day was the same, right? Like she didn't talk to people, she didn't do anything, she was just lying all day. But in a way, she was a living prayer, because she was like a mantra that the world chanted. Because every day she did the same thing, which was try to resonate and synchronize with what she thought or what she felt was God. So when we visited her this February, I spent a whole month, and all I did was I sat next to her and I looked at her face pretty much 24/7, like while I was awake, and then I slept right next to her. And I did this because as I looked deeply into her face, at first I was kind of scared, because if you looked at her chest, it was skeletal, it was fused together, it was scary looking. And I don't know, like it made me feel sick almost, like this is my grandmother, but as I sat there, I felt some sort of deep spiritual connection. And she would nucleate spontaneously these smiles. And after I got past my fear, I found that to be profoundly beautiful. Was that smile real? I don't know. Did she feel happy? I don't know. We asked her. She said she kind of did. But like, what? And I'm going to show you a clip of this so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So in any case, I reached that deep spiritual meditative state with her. All the stuff that I maybe acquired meditatively from her, I knew from knowledge, but I didn't know from my heart. Like I only felt it as I resonated next to her for a whole month, where my singular focus was her, not on earning money or doing anything else. It was just by being next to her. And so now what I try to do, and I'm kind of able to do something, when I sit in meditation, I try to visualize her face and those emerging smiles. And then I try to spontaneously and genuinely create a feeling of love and happiness and have that emerge through my body. That's what I try to do. That's the gift that I've given from her. And the other point, and again, these are things I know, but I never really felt. And it's going to be, I can't describe it, but as I sat next to her on the deathbed, and I first looked at her and I imagined her as a 40-year-old, having her 2 daughters and trying to get through the world. And then I imagine myself as a current 40-year-old. And then I imagine myself in the deathbed as my nephew, my newborn nephew, be 40 years old. Somehow that gave me the urgency or the feeling that I visualize the world as frames in film, like present moment frames in a film where I'm living and dying in each of these frames, and that I've got to live in this present moment and just experience this to the absolute maximum. And it's cliche to say it, but I actually felt it sitting next to her. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video clip. Now again, it may be a little bit difficult. Maybe some of you have sat next to people who are passing. It may be kind of triggering. So no stress in walking away, no stress in closing your eyes. I think it's something that I find beauty in, but also it is kind of intense. It's going to be 5 minutes long, and it's just, my grandmother and what I saw essentially. And this is at the final day before I left. But this is how she was like for that full month that I spent with her. This is 3 months before she passed. So the final part is just my grandmother talking about Seva, and then we'll move on to the social part, which will be pretty cool. So she's just going to talk about, give a little life advice, and then talk about Seva.
लेकिन आप बहुत अच्छा शिक्षा हमको दे रही
You're
हैं.
giving me a lot of wisdom.
सही है.
तो शिक्षा ले
So take my wisdom and
लो शिक्षा
हाँ.
और उसी तरह करो.
हाँ.
do it that way.
जहाँ जैसा पड़े वहाँ वैसा करो.
हाँ.
क्रोध नहीं करना
Don't
चाहिए.
do anger.
एक बार माफ करना
You should
चाहिए
forgive someone once.
किसी को.
हाँ.
एक
Anyone.
बार दो बार माफ
Once,
करो,
forgive them.
उसको
Twice, forgive
समझाओ.
them.
और नहीं माने तो भी थोड़ा चुप हो जाओ.
If they don't listen, then just be quiet.
खुद वो समझ.
Then they'll understand themselves.
क्रोध करने से मारपीट करने से कुछ नहीं.
Anger and fighting will do nothing.
क्रोध पाप का मूल.
Anger is what?
Root
क्रोध
of
क्या नहीं कर
sin.
सकता.
sin. Root of sin.
Anger is a root of sin.
हाँ.
सब कुछ कर सकता.
So this is back when I was like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. I interviewed her. I asked her, what do you like doing? And she said, I like doing Seva.
बस वही परोपकार.
What do you want to do in India? I want to do this Seva.
भाई हम नहीं समझ में आता.
So that's what your favorite color is. She doesn't know.
सब पता है.
What's your favorite plant? I like all plants.
अब बस इतना ही.
हमको जीवन में क्या करना चाहिए?
What should I do in life?
अच्छा अच्छा काम
Do
करना.
good work.
अच्छा काम क्या होता
What
है?
is good work?
परोपकार.
Baroka.
परोपकार का माने क्या
What
होता
does
है?
that mean?
माने क्या होता
What do
है?
you mean you
शब्द
don't
नहीं
know?
जानते.
I don't know what this word means.
दूसरे का भलाई.
Other
Achha.
people's benefit.
दूसरे का किसी का बुराई नहीं तक.
Don't look at anyone's badness.
सबका भलाई तक.
Look for everyone's benefit.